Welcome to the Garden Like a Guru Show, and I'm your host, Tyhson Banighen, a permaculture instructor, and I have my lovely co-host, Sarah Bradshaw, the one and only garden guru. So lots happening on the planet here, and certainly we've had some lovely weather in the last couple of days here in the Shuswap, and we're just packing up the garden and putting it to bed and looking at how to take care of our garden in the future. And so to start it off, we need to know what's up this week, right?
Okay, well, we've hit that new moon. So, you know, we had Samhain, we had Halloween, we had the new moon. So we're now moving into a new phase. Now, one of the traditions that I'm kind of looking at how it's coming back and the benefits of it is after Samhain in the Celtic communities, you didn't do anything more outside. You know, any pumpkins that were left in the field, those were given over to the wildlife and, you know, the rest of the world. You quit gathering fruit. You quit gathering grain. You basically quit doing much of anything outside, and you focused on inside and getting yourself and your home and hearth kind of ready for winter. And I kind of like that. I like the idea of kind of a definitive end to something and going, okay, you know, the rest of it, we can just let it go. And if you do that, if you let certain things go in your garden at this time of year, you know, the wildlife truly benefits. One of the things I liked about your garden was that the blackberries were harvested till people were satisfied with their blackberry harvest. You know, it was, yeah, we've been doing this a long time. And the rest of it were allowed to just be consumed by the hornets, the bees, the wasps. And over the winter, they'll feed many of our seed-eating birds. So a big step in the garden at this time of year is a giant step back from it. Don't really even over clean the way that we've been encouraged to in past years of, you know, huge bonfires of leaves and, you know, cleaning up everything and having the beds all look pristine and that. No, leave it be. You know, let the animals, let the insects, let the other earth dwellers have space in your garden over winter when you're not using it. But, you know, we're coming inside and we're going to be doing other things. It's not like we're going to be, you know, not interacting with our food or not growing things. It's going to just look a lot different than out there in the garden. So today we're in Capricorn and we're still in the first quarter. So this is really, really good time for root development and starting things. And after we do our recap, we're going to get into how to do some things like sprouting and indoor growing. And because sprouts are largely, you know, root development and a tiny little bit of leaf development, Capricorn is actually an excellent sign to start your sprouts under and to get your sprouts and your microgreens growing. Tomorrow, we're going to go through a brief void of course period from about 10 o'clock in the morning till about 7 o'clock in the evening. So, you know, if you get going and you get things started under Capricorn, you'll be able to drift and continue through. But that's actually a really nice window in the day of, you know, late morning on into early evening. And if you're inclined to, you know, be doing group activities or getting together in a casual sense, that's a wonderful window of opportunity there. So, you know, we've got a good day coming tomorrow. And then we've got, at 7 o'clock, we slide into Aquarius. And, Aquarius is very, very good for any of those cerebral activities, anything like, making your lists, doing things in a planning sense. But it also, as an air sign, rules the bloom or flower days in biodynamics. And many, many of the things that we eat in their early phases as sprouts actually do fit into that category of what type of plants they are. Many of them are the aerial parts of the plants if we grow them out. And, we can continue to plant microgreens and sprouts all through Wednesday and Thursday. Thursday, aside from being Remembrance Day, is also when we'll be saying goodbye to Aquarius. It'll be going void. The moon will be going void, of course, at around 1 in the afternoon. And it'll drift out there until very, very close to midnight. Now, because it's combined with Remembrance Day, that long void, of course, is going to be ideal for those kind of gatherings. We're going to be drifting into that void, of course, right around the time that Remembrance Day ceremonies, and that would be kind of winding down from their formal part, and we'd be looking at, the more get together to reminisce and enjoy each other's company. That just coincidentally fits really, really beautifully with that lengthy void, of course. And of course, Thursday afternoon, right around supper time, we hit that second quarter. So when we go out in the evening to the last half of this week, we're going to see a really nice balanced moon. And I always like that. I always like the feeling of that nice balanced energy where, there just doesn't seem to be the pressure that we often feel right around the time of the new or the full. Friday, we move through Pisces and continue through Pisces on Saturday. It goes void, of course, late in the day Saturday, but it actually enters Sunday still in Pisces, but void, of course. And it doesn't move into Aries until almost 8 a.m. Sunday morning. So this is one of those periods of time that we were talking about last week where you end up having a fairly lengthy void of course period. Here it's a good 18 hours, but a lot of it is overnight. And so it's not going to affect things. But with that much, Piscean energy, while we're still in the first half of the moon, we have an entire week here of being able to experiment and play with and get some sprouts and microgreens going so that we can go into winter with some fresh food on the table.
Sounds good. I'm going to start my sprouts.
Yeah. Many years ago, back in the 70s, when, we were kind of re-examining our eating habits and beginning to realize that, that food could go far beyond meat, potato, veg, or, fish, rice, veg, which were kind of the options on the table. I remember one friend complaining, her and her brother complaining to their mom that couldn't they have something different? And her response was, well, they'd have to create a new animal. That very much, was kind of what we grew up with in the 50s and 60s.
That's true, yes.
Yeah. But in the 70s, things were starting to change, and, Diet for a Small Planet came out, and Back to Eden came out, and people started, experimenting and that. And we had 2 small children, and we'd gotten involved with buying co-ops and kind of bulk buying. And we had a goodly supply of food in the basement. We had, we were working well towards, if something major happened, we could survive 5 or 6 months on our food stores. And one year after Christmas, you got that kind of post-Christmas debt load, perhaps, or if nothing else, you're burnt out. You're tired of being out there shopping, and there's a tendency to hole up. And while we were kind of looking at all of this, I remarked to my husband at the time that this food storage in the basement was all well and good, but maybe we should find out before we had to if we could survive on this. And so we would take February. It was the shortest month of the year. And somehow or other, I overlooked the fact that it was also the dead of winter when, and what you could grow in the yard in Calgary, Alberta was like, yeah. So, but we chose February as our month to experiment with and see if we could go an entire month without hitting the grocery store at all. And by the second week, we were desperate for anything with vitamin C in it. We were ripping through the canned tomatoes at an unholy rate. The canned fruit was, like being likewise depleted. The 2 cases of pineapple were almost a mythical memory by this point in time. And we realized, we had to kind of come up with more solutions. And that's when I started growing sprouts. Now, once you start growing sprouts, you tend to attract conversations with other people who are growing sprouts. And so it wasn't long before the food co-op and a few other places I had run into people who were, studying the Essenes and, their almost completely sprouted food diet and other things about sprouts and what sprouts could do for you. And, I became more and more and more aware of the fact that just as a seed is a tiny little plant all packed and ready to go on a journey, it's got its meal with it and the whole 9 yards. It just needs to find a way to get where it's going to go so it can start off on its new life. Well, once you sprout that seed, it contains everything.
Yeah, absolutely everything.
Absolutely everything. It's a tiny little package of an amazing amount of nutrition. And so, sprouting has become something that I find, is I can do it anywhere. Growing, we're going to go into microgreens in a bit, but I really want to cover sprouting pretty thoroughly because I want to impress upon people just how unbelievably easy it is to grow sprouts.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions around that about what's your favorite way to do that. Because there's more than one way, right?
There are. Now my favorite way to do it is actually a way I'd encourage people to start doing right away because it eliminates a lot of the problems that I find in other methods. And that is, I actually like to grow my sprouts on a mat.
Yeah, that's my favorite so far.
Yeah, I really like to grow my sprouts on a mat. And the reason I like to do that is that all of the hulls, all of the husks, all of the stuff that you have to try and rinse out, rinse away, eliminate from the sprouts before you can put them in a sandwich or, on top of the food. All of that gets eliminated by the growing mat because as you water, anything too heavy simply sinks to the bottom, gets caught up in the mat, and you're left with just the sprouts, which you can either clip or pull out, whichever your preference is.
Now, what is your preference in clipping and pulling out?
I like to clip.
Because if you pull out in the mat, there's a certain point in which the roots are into the mat, and then you're going to get part of the mat when you pull it. So you have to make a decision at a certain point whether you're pulling or you're cutting, right?
Yeah, and I like to clip because for a variety of reasons. That being one of them.
Yeah.
The other one being the fact that you can actually kind of access more of it at an easier kind of pace. Like I find if you grab a handful and pull out, you're dealing with, separating roots and that.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just go snip, it's one quick motion. Also, my second favorite method of growing out sprouts works way far and away the best if you clip, and that's growing them on a potting soil or a potting medium spread out. So
Oh,
not a mat, but a basically a shallow tray of soil. Um, Sunflower seeds do ridiculously well that way. And because you're clipping them instead of, rinsing them and that, you don't even have to worry about the shells from the sunflower seeds. You just let them get up a little bit and they clip. The other nice thing about clipping is, you can take part of the mat and harvest it without disturbing the rest of it at all. And if you pull, that's not true. The roots do form a real network. And when you start pulling out one, you disturb the rest of them. And that's even more true if you've got them in an actual soil medium.
right. So if you clip, how many times are you able to clip in your experience?
Well, it kind of depends on, what I'm clipping and how many, people I'm accommodating. Chia, alfalfa, radish, and clover actually do really, really well for clipping and regrowing. There seems to be always some slower to germinate, some slower to grow seeds in those four that when you clip the top, there's just new ones to keep coming up from the bottom. And so, I find that those are the ones that I can reclip and reclip.
What's your favorite? Do you like to grow them separately in rows, or do you like to mix them up?
Well, I kind of do both. I like to grow them in rows so that I can do radish sprouts with this because I want it to be spicy, or alfalfa on this because I want that little bit of fresh green taste. Or the one I'm really not fond of at all are broccoli sprouts,
Right.
which is funny because I like broccoli. But I find the broccoli sprouts, I just don't like them as much.
Right.
But then what I invariably do is, as I'm planting in that, you know me well enough to know by now that I tend to spill and drop and make a mess.
I never noticed that.
Yeah, no. I have one friend who literally refers to me as Mother Earth and claims that, like Pigpen in the Peanuts comic strip, I could raise a dust cloud in a snowstorm, So I invariably end up with, a fair amount of spillage, and those I sweep into a pile and plant as my assorted mix.
Yeah, which you pre-planned.
Yeah, totally, completely and utterly. One of the problems with mixing, of course, is the different rates of growth.
Yeah.
And I find mung beans far more challenging to grow than a lot of sprouts. Now, part of that is because I have a love for really lush, crunchy, exquisite mung beans. I grew up, I spent a lot of my childhood in Richmond, which when I was a kid was a lot of Oriental people. There were a lot of fishermen that had a lot of Japanese heritage. There was a lot of market gardeners that a lot of the Chinese families were very committed to. And of course, there was a lot of crossover between them. And so a lot of my childhood friends ate very traditional Asian foods, and mung beans played a huge part in that. And I remember one woman in our neighborhood had what I, as a kid kind of saw as a really crazy fish tank that, she had mung beans growing in it almost all the time. Well, as an adult, I realized, that she had an absolutely wonderful hydroponic sprouting system set up in her kitchen and, kept the mung beans in beautiful shape. I find them a little challenging to grow, but they certainly grow an awful lot better on a mat
Right.
than
Okay.
they do in these sprouters. Now, the one thing I'd really kind of encourage people to do is not bother purchasing a countertop sprouting gizmo.
Right.
Um, they're hard to clean, they're hard to keep clean. You end up a lot of times dealing with mold in the crevices or algae. I don't know why so many of them are designed with, grooves through them, which I think they foolishly feel is channeling the water in a specific manner. Once you get roots growing, it doesn't really work that way. If they're the round ones, they can be, to fit them with a mat, you got to trim it. So now you've got wastage. If they're square ones, I find that the corners and the crevasses are just way too hard to clean. My experience with them is that they become something that you spend more time cleaning and dealing with than it's worth. If you are actually going to do home sprouting, just one moment. Dan?
I'm coming. I'm in the far room.
Yep. Phone malfunction.
So my favorite is actually using a plant tray with the material, in the bottom of it, and then you can use the lid on it. So
Yes, those little plant starter trays
Yeah,
with
perfect.
the clear lid are absolutely ideal. You can put a mat in there. If you could, like, for matting, I really like the hemp mat that I
Yeah, I
get.
do too.
I really, really like that. But you can use paper toweling, you can use, cotton cloth. There's a variety of things that you can use for matting in the bottom of a tray, but that works really, really well. And they're easy to clean. They don't have little tiny grooves and hidden
Right.
crevices. They're incredibly easy to clean up. They're very sturdy. You can grow a fair amount of sprouts in them and lift them up and move them around without any danger of them collapsing or, folding in on themselves. Um,
And two of them fit on top of your refrigerator, which is an ideal place to grow.
the heat from that it's a brilliant use because often sprouts mold in the wintertime if you don't have a nice warm place to germinate them. If you really are pressed for space, if you really have a small kitchen or you're just getting started and you want to experiment, using a wide mouth jar is actually preferable than going out and buying a little sprouter gizmo. It really is. Like, the thing about the quart jar is that you can rinse your sprouts very, very easily in the jar. And I don't bother with the mesh lids and that whole range of gizmos that you can buy to convert your jars to a sprouter. I find they're completely unnecessary. Before the seeds sprout, if you're pouring the water out of the jar and they land in the sieve, it actually makes them easier to rinse off than if they stay in the jar. Once they've started to sprout, they tend to adhere to the inside of the jar anyway. And what pours out when you swish water around and pour it out into the sieve is 9 times out of 10 hulls, husks, and non-viable seeds, which are only a pain in the butt in the jar anyway. You got to get those out before you can eat the sprouts. So I just simply use a quart jar and, soak the seeds overnight for the first getting them going, and dump them out into a sieve, and then I rinse them under running water and I put them back in the jar. It doesn't hurt them, and then those that sprout, as I said, by the time, you've got them sprouting and you're giving them just kind of a quick swish and rinsing them again, it does them no harm to give them that quick swish,
Right.
get them ending up in the sieve and back into the jar. And that way, as you're putting any of them that are going back into the jar, you can eliminate all of those dead ones, all of those ones that aren't gonna, take off for you. And, and you've got actually a very easy way to control your sprouting.
So you don't cover the lid of the jar with anything, or do you?
Oh, I put a lid on it.
Oh, you put a lid on it. Okay.
Yeah, I put a lid back on it.
Right. Okay.
To maintain.
Do you use a mesh lid, or do you use
Yeah, I just use a regular lid.
Okay.
But I found that, you can buy these lids that look like they're turning your lid into.
I have some fancy one blue and one green and one pink.
And do they work for you? No.
Well, I actually like what we just talked about first. I find that quicker, faster. I don't want to have to rinse and play around and remember and then have stinky sprouts. I don't like that.
Yeah, and I don't like that either. And if my sprouts are growing and they need, kind of more air, I actually find that putting a coffee filter over top of your lid and securing it with either a rubber band or the jar ring is a preferable way of dealing with it. And you can actually, put your water in there, swish it around, put it back on and leave it upside down in a rack.
Right, that's a great idea.
The last little bit of the water out. I think that often we're addicted to, buying some new little gadget or,
Right.
we think we need special equipment
Right,
to
absolutely.
do things, and we don't.
Special equipment.
We don't.
What
And
about Sarah bought one of those little, I think they're hemp bags, and you put the sprouts in the hemp bag and you hang them on a doorknob and put a bowl underneath, and they just drip through. The water drips through to the bowl, so they're not in any water, right?
yeah, well, that, using a sprouting bag, it is another way of doing it. I find I don't like the cleanup. You have to turn the bag inside out. You have to wash it really thoroughly.
Yeah.
And, if somebody opened the door all the way and pressed it up against the wall, now you've got a damp spot on your wall. And,
Yeah.
like to me, those kind of gizmos just are a way of creating a lot of work.
Right.
I find it just makes more work. It makes more laundry. And
Right.
yeah, it keeps the light off of them. But if we go back to the idea of those seed trays,
Yeah, I think that's the best.
well, what I do is I have two. I have one that I have the mat in with the seeds in it. The other one is upside down, keeping everything dark.
Right.
When the sprouts have sprouted and I want, to expose them to light, so that you get the green up effect, which you really only need to do for about the last 24 hours
Yeah.
that your sprouts are growing. I take that off and I replace it with a clear glass or with a clear plastic dome.
You know, I just did with a clear plastic dome and didn't put them in the dark, and they did just fine.
Yeah, I've experimented with a variety of things. Putting a piece of brown wrapping paper, just
Yeah.
simple brown butcher or wrap paper, cut to size over top of them, I find works enough to keep the light out as well. You know, and it depends on the sprouts. There are things that don't mind it,
Yeah.
that little bit of light. I find radish germinates more rapidly if you keep it dark. Alfalfa doesn't care.
Right.
Clover doesn't seem to care much either. Turnip does like to. So, what I found is that the things that grow and develop underground
Yeah.
like to be kept dark for
That
the
makes
first
sense,
few
right?
days, and then they stop. Whereas things that germinate and grow above ground, for the most part, you don't have to worry as much about keeping them in the dark
Right.
initially.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, you know, and a surprising number of things are edible. Like I wouldn't recommend a lot of it because it does have a rather spicy this toughness to it. But a little bit of carrot top is actually a remarkably nice addition to a winter grow mix.
Well, that sounds real. I've never done carrot tops.
Yeah, and I do a variety of things. Like it's really quite nice to do a mixture of peas, beans, lettuces, spinaches, you know, some, and let them get a little bit bigger. Like it
Right.
takes longer for your beans and your peas and your sunflower seeds to grow to maturity for harvesting them. So if you put spinach and lettuce and some of your other mizunas and microgreens in with that mix, then they will be nice microgreen size by time your larger sprouts, your peas and your beans and your sunflower seed sprouts, by time they're at the stage where you want to eat. Now, that is an absolutely perfect addition to a grated vegetable salad in the dead of winter.
Mm-hmm.
You've got some real body to that salad. You know, you've got those crunchy bean sprouts, you've got those larger chunks of peas that have that really gorgeous spring flavor to them. You've got large enough bits of lettuce, spinach, and mizuna to identify them as such, to actually have some differentiation in your salad bowl. And you're going to flesh it out with some grated salad turnip, some celeriac, maybe a bit of grated carrot. When we think winter eating, we need in winter salads,
Yeah.
we so need to go beyond coleslaw.
Yeah. So with that one that you just talked about with peas and beans and lettuce and spinach, would you tend to put that into your dirt medium to do that one, or would you do it on?
Yeah, I like to do that one in a dirt medium because
Okay.
although I gotta say the hemp growing cloth is taking precedence,
Right.
and we really have a fabulous video up on YouTube that goes into it in quite a bit of detail. We're going to be doing more of those types of videos. And of course, if you live in an apartment or even in just a regular house in the dead of winter, dealing with soil can like I don't mind it. I live on a farm, but like I get it. You drop it on the carpet and it's not like dropping it in the greenhouse.
Right.
Just the
I get a sense when you talked about the mung beans, because I know I like my mung beans, pretty big. So
yeah.
I would tend to do those in a jar, I would think, I'm
Yeah.
getting a sense that they'd be better in a jar than doing them on a mat. So,
Yeah, they're tricky. I
yeah,
find they work better if you can almost keep them in a flowing water
oh, okay,
environment, which was what Mrs. Okino did when I was a child. She had an aquarium, an old aquarium that didn't hold water for fish anymore.
yeah,
Like it leaked too much.
yeah,
But she had a series of I think it's kind of like the Dutch garden method of hydroponics. So you have your plant in a medium and you immerse it in the water,
right,
and then you take it out and the water drains out back into the container. You drop it back in. And so she had her mung beans in kind of a basket and she'd lower them into
neat
this sort of
idea.
flowing water and lift them out again. And she had kind of a trickle, like a little, maybe I was a kid, so
Probably was a whole fish system, right, with the aerated
probably an aquarium pump.
yeah, just an aquarium pump and everything. That's a great idea.
And I mean they practically lived on mung beans. I mean, Norman and I would come in from outside and grab a handful of them and sit there and eat them while his mom made us something to eat, So
Yeah,
mung beans I find are a little tricky to get the quality that I want of
right,
the home. I can grow them, but they don't get that beautifulness that I really, really like. But so the thing with sprouts is, you got to wet them every single day, preferably twice a day. So you've got to be willing to, mess with them a tiny little bit each day. Now, I find that the growing mat is unbelievably easy. You can flood it with a little bit of water. You can drain it all off. It holds the seeds. It doesn't dump dirt
you can
anywhere.
leave it alone for a couple of days and still get away with it.
Exactly. When I use a soil medium, instead of that, I tend to take the cover off and spray it with a spray bottle twice a
Right,
day.
okay,
And that way I'm not lifting it up and trying to drain it or anything. I'm just giving a little coat of water to the top and to the underside of the lid. And once they get going, I often can, with them, eliminate the lid completely. So you've got
right,
sunflower sprouts growing about this tall, and they're absolutely lovely. Peas and beans, the plants are edible. We forget this. We focus so much on eating the seed pod
right,
in its relative stages
yeah,
of development that we forget that the plant itself is edible. And we have become addicted to imported food, and so we're looking for the romaine or the iceberg or the leaf lettuce, in the height of January, and really where you're living is going to be where we're living here in cold weather. Even our raw food must supply us with more calories
right,
and more ability to generate heat than you can get from iceberg lettuce. It's a
absolutely,
summer food. And so, when you look at the wealth of what grows, and if we start with what people know and know well, cabbage.
mm,
Okay. Cabbage keeps like nobody's business. Okay. If you buy a head of cabbage a month,
mm,
it will last that month out in the crisper drawer of your refrigerator. Whether you cut into it and grate it, or whether you take leaves off leaf by leaf and cut them up that way, it doesn't matter.
yeah,
Cabbage is a wonderful winter food.
well,
Now, we all kind of tend to see coleslaw as chopped up cabbage with a white grunk mixed into it. But when I hearken back to my childhood, my mother added grated carrot, grated onion, and raisins
Wow, yeah.
to our cabbage salad fairly regularly. Now, the raisins were, a little bit of a treat. Like that would be, maybe for Sunday dinner or if we had company but they added a sweetness to that salad that as a kid I just loved. But when you look at that nutritionally, those raisins are packed with iron.
That's right.
They have B vitamins in them. That carrot, that's going to supply you with lycopene and carotene and vitamin A and things that just are not going to be in the cabbage alone.
Right.
Okay, commercial coleslaw is a marketable
Yeah,
commodity.
it's a dead product.
It's a marketable commodity. It's not what we're talking about.
No.
So, to your coleslaw, think in terms of adding carrot. Think in terms of adding some grated onion. You don't do onion and garlic, but salad turnip, those lovely
Yeah, or even
turnips.
cranberry, dried cranberries, or
Dried cranberry. Yes,
absolutely.
yes. And then, my daughter, Kate, has perfected grated winter salads. Oh my goodness. When she brings a salad to a winter potluck, we're just thrilled because she will have grated celeriac, a little bit of grated Chioggia beet, maybe a little bit of golden beet, salad turnip, watermelon radish. More and more, we're starting to get away from just the tiny little breakfast radishes, which is what they were originally designed for. Those radishes that are so popular with us are actually a fairly recent construct in the radish world. They're only a couple of 100 years old. For decades, we have been growing radishes like the daikon, the mini purple daikon.
Yeah.
Amuses me because the mini purple daikon is bigger than my head. The China rose radish, it will outweigh any turnip you could imagine growing. Then there's the watermelon radish, which, is incredibly mild tasting. So the black Spanish radish, which is about, twice the size of a carrot and, has a real nice, yummy bite to it. These are things that our market gardeners are growing, root cellaring, and having in their winter greenhouses. And you can go to a farmer's market in the dead of winter, or you can sign up for a community shared agriculture box where it gets delivered to your door or to a pickup point. I mean, what could be easier? I loved getting my CSA box. I didn't have to decide what I was cooking for dinner. Louise and Herman had done that for me, and she'd probably even included a recipe.
A recipe, yeah. And not only that, there was things in there that you've never seen before, at least for me.
Yeah, and and get brave about your winter eating. Walk past that imported food.
Right.
Those tomatoes don't taste like tomatoes anyway.
No. Well, I do have a story about we had a challenge, like you had a challenge about living on the food that you'd stored for a month. And when we were running the youth hostel, we gave ourselves a challenge whether we could make it through the winter with buying no salad greens in town. So we took a big, huge cupboard, one of these big wardrobe cupboards, and we put 2 lights in the bottom and vents at the bottom and vents at the top and put racks in it, and we grew sprouts. All the sprouts you're talking about. And we fed everybody sprout salads all winter long, never bought any salad dressing stuff or salad making stuff at all for the winter. You can do it, and it's really tasty.
It's incredibly tasty. And, we had a communal kind of house art store, local store in Enderby for quite a few years called the Gypsy Bazaar. And we lived and ate communally in the back, and it was wonderful. And we had a young woman who partway through the winter, she was craving a green salad. We'd been having all these wonderful grated salads, all these incredible winter raw food concoctions, but she was absolutely committed that she wanted a green salad. So she went out and she got a head of iceberg lettuce, and she got a couple of tomatoes, and she got a bunch of radishes, and she even bought a bunch of green onions, which turned out to be a blessing, and some celery. And she came home and she put together this salad, and we sat down, and there was like 5 or 6 choices of salad dressings, and we dug through the fridge and we got the salad dressings out because we hadn't been using them, it wasn't summertime. And we sat down, and the salad went around, and then the salad dressings started going around, and then they kind of went around again. And we went into the main course, and Tana was, well, what a waste of money that was. And we kind of looked at her and she said, it was terrible. The only thing that had any taste at all were the green onions. And we laughed because she had chopped up a bunch of them and had set them aside because not everybody likes onions in their salad. Well, we had to keep refilling the garnish bowl of green onions because the onions and the salad dressing was the only thing that was making the salad edible.
Wow.
And, so like, not just like learning how to, grow a few of your own sprouts and, bringing that fresh, live food to your table. I mean, it's not going to get any more live. The only way you can get food that is like more alive or, as fresh as the sprouts and that you grow would be if you do what I'm hoping our next guest star will, our guest person will be able to show us, which is a tower garden where, you go over and you pick your pepper and your tomato and you bring them right to the table, even in the dead of winter. But even when you can't do that, you can do this with sprouts. You can get that fresh, live food, but also explore. Talk to your farmers and gardeners and explore the wealth of winter food that we have. I don't know why we lost hold of the food that we used to grow and store for the winter. But by the time I was a child, it was reduced down to basically squash, turnips, parsnips, potatoes, cabbage, carrots.
Right.
That was it. The beets got pickled and canned. We didn't have multiple varieties of beets with all their different flavors. We didn't have multiple varieties of large radishes with their different colors and flavors. We didn't have multiple varieties of, gold turnips and salad turnips, and, that those had all kind of disappeared into the woodwork. And we were left with turnip that, unless you're really a fan of it, you can only eat a little bit of it. Parsnips that, unless you know how to cook them right, just simply give you gas and don't.
I love my parsnips.
I love parsnips, but they got to be done right.
That's true.
And it's like, then we started, as we brought in, tastier imported food, these storage foods fell even further into disrepute. And until we have 2 generations of people who say things like, oh, I don't eat squash. And it's like, you don't eat squash. Like, do you realize that in squash, there is everything from, very, very mild tasting to sweeter than any sweet potato that you can grow, that there is this immense range of what it tastes like, what it looks like, how you can prepare it, what you can do with it, And, so I really want people to get out there and really explore all these other winter storage foods. And, if you're lucky enough to be in a situation like you are, where you have a winter greenhouse, this is the time of year that you should be really filling it with your kale, with your bok choy, with your, any of your brassicas will do at least some growing in a winter greenhouse. And then there's all those wonderful, wonderful tasting greens, Claytonia, which is also known as miner's lettuce, corn salad, your hardier varieties of spinach, your hardier varieties of greens. These are things that you should be looking at growing in that winter greenhouse and really getting them up and running.
Do you have a winter greenhouse set of seeds that maybe people could purchase?
I actually, somebody started me off on that road last fall or last winter.
Yeah.
Got partway through winter and I started getting requests.
Yeah.
And I realized that this is something that needs to be addressed. So we have been beefing up our seed collection. I should be
very good.
posting the new list within by the end of this month. The new list should be up. And yes, we have added corn salad.
Oh, good.
And we have added a couple of other winter things. We've added a couple of new cresses.
Hopefully it won't be too late to plant when that's available.
No, those are things that you can actually continuously plant.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds wonderful.
Yeah. So, there's so much that we can do in terms of prepping ourselves and getting ourselves through winter. And it's really important to realize that there's multiple levels that this is worth doing, okay? Like financially, you are going to pay less money for better quality food if you start growing sprouts and microgreens and things that you can eat fresh and quit buying the imported greens and that in the wintertime. It's going to really save you a lot of money. The nutritional value of what you're doing is huge. And I cannot stress enough the importance of eating regionally in terms of what it does for your body. If you live in the tropics, you can live very nicely on fresh picked tropical fruit. If you live in colder weather areas, you need foods that are grown in that area that provide your body with the components that it needs to deal with the challenge.
And that's one thing about microbiotics is they really, really stress that, right?
Yeah. That, you really need to look at what your body needs, not just what your taste buds crave.
Right.
I mean, if I did nothing but listen to my taste buds, I live on chocolate ice cream, and
well, maybe a few chips in there.
Maybe a little bit of salt, Okay. Mind you, I got to tell you, my taste buds would never let me give up blueberries and strawberries. I freeze copious quantities of both and use them all winter long. And that's another thing, using the food
that we preserved.
Yeah. And I'm exploring older methods of preserving blueberries because I have unearthed, with some help of my Indigenous friends, some recipes and methods of dealing with blueberries that I think can actually ramp them up to the kind of superfood that we often think of when we think of elderberries.
Wow, it sounds wonderful.
Yeah, like fermenting them and cooking them down with no added sugar and on a very low, slow heat. A lot of the trail food recipes were a combination of bison meat or moose meat and blueberry.
And Bannock.
Yeah. Bannock, as we know it, is a European import.
Well, with blueberries, it's very nice though.
It's beautiful. It really is. But I had a lovely Cree woman, Margaret Cardinal. Hello out there, Margaret, if you're anywhere about, who worked at the Gruard Vocational Center in Northern Alberta. And she taught textile art. So she taught, wonderful stuff about that. But she worked with these people who were helping recapture the foods and many aspects of the culture. And she would make us things like pancakes made with cattail fluff.
Wow.
Yeah, and I thought, oh, this is going to taste terrible. It did not. She showed us how to grind lamb's quarter seeds into a flour and use that to bread the fish before we cooked it. A whole variety of things, and pointed out to us that ground wheat flour was not a staple in the North American diet.
No, they didn't grow it.
No, they did not, but they very rapidly saw ways, to incorporate it into their trail food. But, pemmican was, often a combination of meat, fat, and fruit.
No.
And it was not designed to sit down and eat it like it was a granola bar. You sat down, you made a fire, and you crumbled this into hot water. You made a soup, you made a stew. That way, your body had the warmth of that food inside of it, and the fat was easy for your body to absorb and break down, and it carried the nutrients from the other foods in there. And the berries helped keep it as a preservation. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't a sweet treat granola bar at all. This was like serious food that they had taken all of the water out of to make it a perfect trail food, because water was the one thing that you could add back in with absolutely no problem whatsoever once you were in camp. Yeah.
Well, we're nearly at the top of the hour, and we're getting closer. One of the things I was thinking about is, do you have any recommendations of where to get good quality sprouting seeds? Like, is there a certain brand you like better than others, or where do you get yours from, or where could people get them? What's your suggestions?
I have a combination of sources for mine,
Okay.
And so we have a fairly limited amount of sprouting seeds that we ship out to people. I recommend that you check some of your local sources. Now, here in Salmon Arm, we have the Salmon Arm Health Food Store, which has an entire sprouting area. Last year, I saw in the garden seed area, I saw Buckerfields had an entire chunk of their seed area devoted to sprouting seeds.
Oh, nice. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and Nutters also has an area, and I haven't been in to explore, but I'm going to make the assumption that the bulk barn in Salmon Arm would be the same as most bulk barns most places, and it would also have a section for sprouting seeds. Now, the thing that you got to keep in mind when you're hitting places like Bulk Barn, Nutters, and even Shuswap health food stores is the age of those seeds.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
As seeds age, viability goes down. So if you buy your alfalfa seeds from a store and you bring them home and you soak them overnight and you only get, like about 40 or 30 or 40% of them sprouting, you're going to have a lot of wastage. You're going to have to be dealing with a lot of stuff, and you're going to know that those seeds are old. Okay?
Right. So bring your pendulum.
Yeah, and dows for sure when you're buying stuff like that. The food distribution system really slows down your ability to get food in a rapid manner. It really, really does. Right. And so it can be, a year or two in a warehouse, and warehouses get fumigated. So even if you're buying certified organic stuff, if it's sitting in a warehouse and the warehouse is being fumigated every 3 months, which it has to be by law for vermin control, and that, you're going to start getting contamination in the seeds. And so, don't be afraid to ask for the source. Like, where do you get your seeds? If Shuswap Health Food Store and Nutters and Bulk Barn are all buying them from Horizon distributors, they're all getting them from the same place. They're all basically the same seeds. Now, one of the reasons people don't just buy garden seeds and use them for sprouting is because very, very often your larger seed companies and that treated their seeds, okay? But fortunately, seed companies are getting away from that. So, purchase their seeds every year and renews every year, like, West Coast Seeds does and like I do. And then the seeds that you get from them will be very current, and provided they're not treated seeds. And both I don't sell treated seeds at all. Right. All of the seeds that we grow out are organic. If you order from West Coast, they will tell you whether or not their seeds are organic. And I am not sure I've ever seen treated seeds in their catalog.
Well, I do have to run. We're at the top of the hour.
Are we?
Supposed to be somebody else. That was so amazing. Thank you for all that information on how to make it through the winter with healthy, vitamin-rich, dense microgreens, and making grated salads. Well, and wonderful information. Thank you ever so much.
Yes, and Fieldstone Granaries, before we go, Fieldstone Granaries, local, organic, untreated grains. You can mill them, but you can also sprout them. Okay?
All right, thank you.
So they will have things like buckwheat and wheat and spelt, and all of those make fabulous, fabulous sprouts. And we're going to do more about sprouts in that next week.
All right, so come on back next week and learn some more about sprouting. So until then, be healthy, wealthy, and wise.
All righty. See you next week.
Bye for now.